welcome to AJ Paints. I'm Andy. In this video I'll be painting a rot troll, one of the undead creatures which can trouble your party in Maladum, a board game by Battle Systems. This is one of the bigger miniatures in the game, but it's not too difficult to paint. There are four main areas we need to focus on: the skin, the roots, the bones, and the exposed rotten flesh. I'm using whole red as a base for the flesh parts and dark sea blue and heavy brown as my base for the skin and roots. I'm keeping things simple with a dry brush of heavy brown to start with. I've picked this colour because it's sort of an in-between the yellower roots and the grey of the skin. In the end I'm going to lose most of this heavy brown with my dry brushes later on, but for now it gives me a sense of where the raised areas are and where the detail is that I need to pick up later. Using dark sea blue to pick out the shadow areas, so you can see here under the arms, under the legs, and on the side of the face, under the chest. And finally for my base coat, picking out the flesh areas with whole red. Just to give that rotten feel, I mixed some of the whole red with a little bit of dark sea blue, and I came up with this really nice sort of purple rotten colour, and I ended up re-base coating all of the flesh with that. The rot troll's skin is described as being living stone, but this one's been dead for a while, so I'm going to go for a greyish colour. It's a medium grey, it's described as cold grey, although when you paint it on it does appear to have a little bit of yellow in it. That goes really well over the top of that heavy brown. You can see here I'm not dry brushing everything. I'm focusing definitely on the top of the areas, but not doing anything in the shadow areas really beyond picking out a little bit of the detail. You could stop at this point, it would look absolutely fine on the tabletop, but we're going to take a little bit of time to pick out some bone areas now and make the miniature look a bit nicer. We'll only need these two colours for the bone, starting with the heavy brown and then blending up to the pale sand for the lightest points. Here I'm just basing everything that's bone in the heavy brown. For the toenails here I'm also treating them as bone, and I'm using the nice sculpt on the miniature to make it easier for me, just sweeping the side of the brush down across the raised parts and leaving those shadow areas dark. With the base colour done, it's time to work on the highlights. Pale sand is a great colour for this. A little bit of yellow and a little bit of white in there. Mixes really nicely with that heavy brown to give you a good bone colour. For these parts, I'm only using a 50-50 mix of the pale sand and the heavy brown underneath. I don't want to go too bright too quickly. And I'm using a much finer brush. You can see here drawing on some lines to make the horns or any of the bone sections have a bit of texture. Painting details like this is pretty easy. You can just sweep the edge of the brush down along the raised areas and you can get the fine lines drawn in quite quickly. I'm focusing down towards the front or the bottom of the toenails here because those are going to be the lightest parts. And now coming back in with pure pale sand, so really bright, and you can see here it's really focused in and got those lighter areas done. You could call it done here, but you could add a bit more detail to the flesh and certainly the roots. So the flesh is what we're going to do next. This wine red on its own is far too strong and brighter colour for that rotten flesh, but mixing in some cold grey desaturates it quite a lot, and for this first highlight stage that's fine. The next highlight after this, I'll add in some pale sand and start to get in the lighter colours, just focusing on the tops where I'd want that reflection to be. You can see now from the colour of the brush, my final highlight is a really pale grey colour. That's the grey, the wine red and pale sand all mixed together to get that final light highlight. And here we are with another potential stopping point, but our next stage I think is going to be to look at the roots holding the rock troll together. I've chosen a contrast paint for the base of the roots, that's wildwood, mostly because it's really dark, but also because it's a thin paint and it flows really smoothly, and that makes it very easy to pick out all these details. You can see here, obviously this is speeded up footage, but it's a nice paint to work with, and it's fairly quick to go over the whole miniature. On the original artwork for the rock troll, the roots have got a yellow colour to them, so I'm using this heavy gold brown as my colour on top of the contrast paint. You can see here, taking it fairly steadily, but again using the side of the brush makes it much easier. You can sweep across these edges and pick out that detail. I only want to be doing the work on the very top edge of the roots here, leaving the nice dark brown around the outside and the bottom sides, so that it really makes it stand out against that grey skin. After building up that yellow colour a little bit more, I'm happy to call this done. I have added a bit of extra grey just brushing on to pick out some highlights there as well. But now it's time for the final thing, basing it. Again, you do that however you like. I always just go for a really simple base on mine, just P3 iron hull grey brushed on in a few thin coats. I've used 2 layers of AK Interactive varnish on this, starting with a satin over the whole miniature just to give it some strength, and then ultra matte on the bits which I want ultra matte, which is everything except the shiny flesh parts. Well, there we go, all done. If you've got this far, I thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.